Hello and welcome to NPC. That stands for Next Portable Console. It's the show all about the games that we take with us. I'm Brendan Bigley, and I'm here with the one and very literally only John Voorhees.
You know what? I'm not the only.
I just meant because Federico's not here. But
it's true.
I believe you.
There are other John Voorheeses.
How many are there? Have you talked to them?
I have not talked. Well, I've talked to my father. I am a junior after all.
Oh, is that true?
Yes, it's true.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really put it on the end of my name very often, but yeah, I am technically a junior.
That's
so
interesting.
That. Yeah, Federico.
You never had that era where people would like make Facebook groups with all the people who had the same name? I feel like that was such a common thing in like 2009-ish.
It was. Yeah, there are other John Voorheeses. There is one that I run across on the internet every now and then who's an environmental lawyer at a big law firm.
Okay.
There is another one who is a former
pro or anti the enviorment. Are they like the
I don't know. I haven't looked if they're working for the coal companies or or like some public interest
John
group.
Fracking Voorhees.
Yeah, exactly. There's another guy who is a former NASA engineer who sings country music and puts out albums on Bandcamp. So go look for him.
That's awesome.
And that person has johnvoorhees.com, and I look every year on the expiration date to see if I can get it, because there's no website there anymore. There used to be.
Yeah.
But they're still paying.
Oh, that hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt.
Do you have a personal website still?
I do. I have .co.
.co.
I don't know.
It's not that bad.
It's fine. It's fine. There's not much there anyway.
You should get .online. John Voorhees online.
Yeah, because I am online after all.
You are online.
I'm very online.
Yeah.
Maybe a little less these days, but yeah, I am online. Yeah.
That's for the best. You want to talk about video games?
Yeah, we should talk about video games.
There's a bunch of news to talk about. Okay. This is going to sound like completely out of left field, and I promise I'm not trying to make everybody's brains slide out of their ears when I say this.
Okay.
Percy and I have been watching a lot of Love Island recently.
I saw that you mentioned Love Island the other day.
Yeah. I think this will be the... Look, I like reality TV, and I've watched a lot of reality TV.
You have a lot in common with Federico there. He's a big Love Island. There's a version of that in Italian that he watches a lot, so we should talk about this next week, too.
We should. Yeah, there's a lot of different Love Islands out there.
Yeah.
But I like reality TV. Love Island is always one that I haven't watched because it felt mindless in a way that I couldn't really abide by. And then also every episode is an hour and a half, and it comes out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
While the season's happening,
so
there's 36 episodes one every single day for 36. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. But that said, there's this one guy on Love Island USA this season, and his name is Sincere. His name is literally Sincere, and he is a villain.
Oh, he's not sincere.
No, he is. What's fascinating about him is that he's like, I would say Thanos adjacent.
Oh, wow.
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe specifically, where he's like so sure that he's right, and understands that what he's doing is wrong when he's constantly hurting people, like emotionally, and like has this like mental dissonance between what he's doing and what he's saying to people, but he always thinks he's in the right until he gets called out on his stuff, and then he's like, I'm wrong, but then he continues to do the wrong thing. And I find it fascinating. I'm saying all of this because AYANEO is teasing a Game Boy Advance.
Okay, I was wondering where we're going because I thought we were going to talk about video games today.
I am at this point, I think, where Love Island is creating new synapses in my head where everything connects to Love Island in some way. But when I see AYANEO teasing, it's a new Conquer handheld.
Yes.
The Conquer Pocket Advance.
Yes.
Remake the classic, reimagined with playful style, made for a passion that never fades. It's coming soon, and I see all of these people in the comments, in the replies to AYANEO being like, so excited for this one, hope it has this feature, hope it's this much money. I'm like, they just released 100 of a console and then canceled it.
And then
last week,
then the CEO did a live stream,
yes,
and basically didn't say anything about it other than he talked about it, but he didn't say, "Oh, we're sorry," or "We're doing more," or "This is just how it is." He just kind of like floated around it.
I understand for the people who like AYANEO and like their build quality and like their devices. Cool. That's great for you. We have to, I think, at a certain point, as a community who talks about this company, start to recognize that like we are in an abusive relationship with them where we keep giving them second chances.
Yes.
And they keep fumbling it every single time. Like there are more fumbles than there are not fumbles. And at what point do you say, like, I need to stop rewarding this company with, like, first of all, coverage, which I understand the irony of saying, and second of all, just taking them seriously as a company you would buy anything from.
Yeah.
Like I think for me, the arc has gone from they announced a phone and I was excited about it when they announced the phone to you couldn't pay me to try even test that phone.
No, take a plunge on that phone. I would never take a plunge on that phone. That phone is still evolving too, from what I understand from that live stream. And they also on that live stream talked about the next two, which at the top end of pricing is $5,300, Brendon. $5,300. Think about that for a minute. Even in this economy, I mean, $5,300 for a gaming handheld is insane.
It's remarkable, the audacity of AYANEO. I find it baffling, and I can't. I like talking about it on the show.
I do.
Don't get me wrong.
It's pretty easy dunk. It's humorous, but at the same time, and I have bought AYANEO things in the past.
Yeah,
that were good, including that original Pocket Micro.
Yeah.
But this company, despite having had a lot of problems at the beginning of the year and saying they were going to fix things and they were going to kind of focus
and focus, yeah.
Every single week we have a new one of these stories that we can talk about. This Game Boy Advance, I mean, there's literally nothing about it. It's literally like words in a tweet, in an image. And
maybe by the time this episode is out, you'll have seen the thing, but at the moment, it's just what I said.
Yeah, literally, that's all it is. It's just words on an image that are styled like the original Game Boy Advance typography, basically.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know, man. I at this point, there was a version of me that long-term wanted to eventually get an AYANEO device as like maybe kind of an endgame device. Like wait for the right one, pick it up, and that would kind of be the last one for me. I don't see that happening anymore. Yeah. And I think the thing about it too that really gets me is the Conquer brand or sub brand that they set up as this like more affordable line, like just ended up not being more affordable also.
No, it's just different in a way that's impossible to tell what what's the marketing difference between the two brands. There's really it's not clear at all. I mean, I think in part maybe what they're doing is struggling a little bit with all the component prices, and so they're trying to reestablish their niche maybe. Before they were, for a long time, all they made were like horizontal handhelds that ran Windows.
Yeah.
And now they're into Android and they're doing the retro stuff and they're doing mini PCs and you can buy a battery pack from them. There's all kinds of stuff going on. A phone.
I feel like you look at what AYANEO is doing, then you look at what Anbernic is doing, and Anbernic is also kind of like wading into a bunch of different product categories. But I find that it's a much more, which is interesting to say, especially if you've listened to the show for a while. But like it feels like a slower, more methodical, more intentional kind of exploration. Like they have a controller, and they're like seeing what it's like to be a controller company.
It feels like they have a plan.
It does feel like they have a plan.
AYANEO?
Which is bizarre to say about a company that released the RG Vita and the Rotate this year, and has their like Switch Lite clone coming out this year.
Yeah.
But still, I'm interested in the way that Anbernic has kind of like shaped up a bit over the past year and a half.
Yeah, and one of the stories we have for today too. I mean, just moving right into Anbernic is that they have done a firmware update for the RG line of handhelds. And it's moving more towards this, this home setup, which is a kind of like, their launcher setup that they had in the Rotate. And they've got in a bunch of other things now. They're coming to these other devices, and you can do it over the air or as a download. And I think it's interesting because with all that's going on with the price of storage and memory, it makes a lot of sense to me that Anbernic would finally be focusing on software. I'm not here to tell you that Anbernic software is finally like really good or anything. On the other hand, they are trying, and I think that is a potential area of differentiation for a lot of these companies to focus on the software experience, when in the past they either relied on the open source community to come up with something better, or they just didn't care and they just gave you kind of a junky UI. I mean, they're working on it.
Yeah. This has been, I think, my ongoing complaint about this entire scene since I first got into it, which is just like the out of the box experience is basically unusable, and then you need to rely on all these, just the work of others,
right?
Passionate in the community to fix it. And like, how long until one of these companies comes up with a front end or some kind of launcher that just like feels good to use? And I don't know if the RG ecosystem, as they're calling it, is gonna end up being it, or RG Home, sorry, is gonna end up being the one. But I am at least glad to see them taking a step in the right direction there. I think it's the right approach, and I think the first company that like nails it, whether that be even just like we've acquired Cocoon,
right,
or like our devices launch with Cocoon, the developers are getting a cut of all that money, like a little bit off the top or whatever.
Right.
Like I feel like there's a version of that makes a lot of sense to me that I don't think any of these companies would do, but probably should do.
Yeah. I think too that it helps that a lot of these companies are gravitating towards Android, because Android has, a very rich developer environment and set of APIs that you can use to build apps and launchers and all that kind of thing. Very much so like, the iPhone. And before making custom stuff for various flavors of Linux, probably a little more complicated. You've got a lot more Android developers in the world that you can hire to do this stuff for you than you probably did people who are, fiddling around with Linux.
Totally. No, I think you're so right there. Yeah. What else we got, John?
Well, the Valve thing.
Yeah, wait, can I mention at the top here? I do have, as of this morning, sitting in my inbox, the email from Valve saying I can buy the Steam machine.
Oh, you do? I haven't checked today, so maybe I do too, but interesting.
I got it this morning.
So?
I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
Here's where I've landed. First, I mean, we've talked about this enough on the show, so I won't relitigate the whole thing, but I have my gaming PC. It's basically the Steam machine. I have my mini PC on the living room. Also works really well for more games than I would think would work. The fact that I can play James Bond or 007 First Light on that mini PC, miraculous.
Yep.
So I think I'm fine on that front. What I have come to realize, the more I've thought about this actually, is that I'm more interested in trying out the frame than I am the machine.
I said the exact same thing to Federico a few weeks ago. I said, I think I'd like to try the frame more. And he's like, oh, I've already been down this road like 2 or 3 times and I'm not going to do it anymore. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting concept, especially with, utilizing Proton and Android and everything.
Yeah, that's, I think, the thing that's interesting to me. I think at the end of the day, I have also gone down this path multiple times, only twice, not as many times as Federico has, but like I had the PSVR 1. I currently have the MetaQuest 3, I think, which I use maybe once every 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think having something that is like PC specific, I can plug into my gaming PC and just kind of have on in the event that a good VR game comes out or something interesting for VR comes out that I can test out, instead of like needing to tie myself to Facebook and use their marketplace and whatever. Right. I know there's ways I think I can plug the MetaQuest into my computer, but kind of don't want to. I'd rather just have like a PC specific version of this thing.
Right. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I mean, even if it's not a VR game, you could potentially use it as just a big screen in front of you in your room,
That's true. Minority Report my way around.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, what's going on with Valve?
So Valve, in addition to sending emails out to Brendon, has opened...
That's the big news.
Yeah, that's the really big news. They released the firmware and the CAD drawings for that e-ink faceplate for the Steam machine.
Beautiful.
That they talked about when it was
Never mind, I'm back in. I'm buying it.
Yeah. When it was very first announced, they showed this off, and it was pretty neat because it was showing like various statistics about the CPU and the GPU and the fans and all this stuff. And so they've got like a parts build that you can get from Adafruit, and it includes several different parts that end up costing somewhere in the $90 to $100 range, which is, I think, reasonable. I mean, I think that's not surprising to me, having looked at various e-ink stuff on sites like that before. And I don't know. I mean, I think if someone gets a hold of these parts in this firmware and then adapts it to more general use, I might dive in myself and fiddle around with this stuff. I mean, this is very specifically designed for the front of the Steam machine. But yeah, it looks pretty cool.
Yeah. Did you buy that little e-ink
I
thing?
Sure did.
Wait. Oh, you had the XT e-ink.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that like little kind of display that people were buying that had like a calendar on it and stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, the terminal, the TRMNL. Yes, yeah. I have one of those, and I haven't done enough with it because that's also very programmable, and they have a whole system online that you can do through the web.
Yeah.
And it cycles through a few things. It has like my calendar and the weather and, some of the things that were pre-built. But you can build things for it yourself too, which is also what I want to do with this little guy. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
Did you get the X3? It's the XTE ink.
XTE ink, yeah.
Did you get the X3 or the X4?
The X3, I believe this is the developer.
Is that the one that it's so thin it doesn't have the USB-C port?
Yes, which is
that was the deal breaker for me. Yeah,
that was a big bummer because I know I'm going to lose that cable because it's a USB-A cable with a pogo pin, 4 pogo pin thing on the back. That is a bummer, but it's the developer version, which means I can flash a new firmware onto it, which I know that there are some good open source projects to do that. So I just haven't gotten around to it. I got it on Prime Day. It was like $60 or something. So
yeah. I've seen some cool stuff for reading with other firmware. I haven't seen anything else though. Are people experimenting with like dashboard kind of stuff also?
Mostly it's reading related. But what I would like it for is to send articles to it, over Wi-Fi. So that's what I'm going to experiment with. Either have like an existing read later app that I'll put on, that I'll get to, I don't know, maybe run on there, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. How it goes. I'm not sure how I would do it, but I may have to build my own app.
Yeah. I was going to say you could probably do something that's like pulling an RSS reader, converting that to a PDF.
Yes.
Sending the PDF.
Yes. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because I've also been testing the Remarkable Paper Pure.
Oh, really?
Yes, which I'm going to write about on Mac Stories relatively soon. But it's a like a 10-inch tablet. It is remarkable in the sense that it feels really good to write on. It really does feel like paper compared to like writing on an iPad, for instance. Mm-hmm. There is just enough friction that it feels a lot more like a real pen to paper, which I like. I'm not a big note taker though, and what I really wanted it for was, you could put it into a developer mode, which jailbreaks it essentially, voids its warranty completely.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, caution.
That's funny.
But what it allows you to do then is to install, it's still pretty locked down, but on the other hand, you can use it kind of like an input device. You can do things on it. Like I've been experimenting with sending it summaries of emails with a checkbox next to them. And if I check off the box, it'll then do something back on my Mac Mini. It'll take the email and it'll turn it into a reminder to respond to that person, for instance.
Yeah.
And you can do things like that, which are pretty cool. But yeah, I've been deep into the e-ink lately, Brendon. Deep.
Yeah. I feel I've been hearing the bubbling of the e-ink at a wave, I guess is how I'll put it. Because I was even just listening to the Vergecast the other day, and they were talking about e-ink devices also. It just feels like e-ink is kind of having a moment right now.
It is, I think, in part because the refresh rate has gotten up to a level where you can almost kind of sort of use these as regular, tablet devices, which is what the Books Palma was all about, right? I mean, it just ran regular old Android, and you could run Android apps on it. Now, a lot of Android apps are not optimized for e-ink at all, and they look terrible. But if you specifically design an app for that very high contrast black and white background, it works really well.
Yeah. I talked about this on the show, but I tested a Game Boy emulator on the Books Palma 1, and the refresh rate was high enough that it just felt like playing on the Game Boy with a lot of ghosting, which I actually don't mind. I think that looked kind of nice, especially for like Pokemon and RPGs and stuff. If you're playing something like Kirby or something, it's a little worse, but I had a decent time with it. But better than you would think. So I think you're right. I think e-ink's it's kind of coming back. What else we got? What's on our list today?
Let's see.
Oh man, we should talk about Armada. Have you seen Armada?
Oh, I have not, and I'm glad you know something about this because it did intrigue me when I saw this article.
Yeah, so the article we have here is that EmuDeck is adding support for Armada, and there's kind of like a new launcher front end thing going on in EmuDeck, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. The bigger story that I think we should talk about is definitely Armada, though. Armada is, if you recall, a couple weeks ago, I think it was, I brought the new version of Rocknix to
the
show that had access to Steam Big Picture mode.
Mm-hmm.
Armada is essentially taking that idea and saying, we're just going to go all the way with it. And what this is going to do is we're going to allow you to just boot directly into SteamOS specifically. So this is, instead of like, we are taking Linux, putting it on your Android handheld and allowing you to boot into Steam Big Picture mode, and all of the issues that that would come with that, which I explained a lot, I think, on that episode, but specifically like window management, games just like not understanding the architecture, et cetera, et cetera. This team, Armada, has figured out a way to just get like full SteamOS, including being able to like boot into desktop mode if you want to, running on Android handhelds. And it's like mostly the same ones, like it obviously works better on the more recent ones. So like the iNode 3, for example, is like kind of the, highest class one that you could probably launch it on.
Right.
But people have gotten it running on, the Odin 2 lineup and, the most recent Retroid Pockets and stuff like that. It seems great. I haven't done it yet myself. I actually just pulled my iNode 2 out of storage specifically so I could test this because I really want to test this.
Yeah, I want to try it too.
I've said this many times. Like, if I can get SteamOS running on the iNode 2, that is the Steam Deck Mini that I have dreamed of, I think, basically the whole time the Steam Deck has existed. So I will test this and I'll come back to it. I just learned about this yesterday. Joey's Retro Handhelds has a great video about how to install it and kind of all the pros and cons of it and what you need to worry about.
How does it handle the pointer?
I don't know. Good question.
Yeah, I'm kind of just curious because unlike a Steam Deck, you don't have the pads in most handhelds.
You have the touchscreen, at least.
True. I mean, that's
probably works.
Pretty small touch targets for
not great.
Yeah.
But still very interested in trying this. I'll report back.
Okay.
On
well,
Armada.
that's something.
Seems great.
Yeah, that's something we should all check out and maybe talk about in a future episode.
Yeah, I do. I would be interested to have Federico try it on the Odin 3 and see how that works. But the short version of all of this is that there is a new. It's called the Rift front end launcher for EmuDeck.
Yeah.
Which allows you to take games from your SteamOS library and put them in EmuDeck as well. So
have you used EmuDeck much in the past? I've used it now and then. It never has really stuck for me for some reason.
I'll be honest. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I find it a little bit clunky from a management perspective. I think what they have nailed and what will work for most people is just kind of the onboarding process and getting all of that stuff installed in a way that I think makes it kind of like foolproof, which is great.
Yep.
That's, I think, what the scene needed. What I have a harder time with is like the ongoing management of things. Like, okay, if I want to switch some stuff or if I want to be changing my library or whatever, this is obviously dependent on the different platforms. Like, it's, I think, easier on Android than it is on Steam OS, for example. But I go back and forth on it, honestly. I did try it on my gaming PC when I got it, just to see how I would feel about that. And it was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really have a huge takeaway about EmuDeck outside of like, I'm glad it exists, but it's not really for me,
Yeah, no, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I have used it in the past. I've tried it here and there in different handhelds and I don't know. I always ended up uninstalling it and going with something else. But
yeah,
we have more news about our friends at Anbernic because they did do a gameplay video of the RG55G1 that I think is worth mentioning because it suggests a lot of things about the underlying hardware that we didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's, for instance, they showcased that they were running Portal 2 via Game Native, which, pretty impressive. They also, I guess, used things like a Vita 3K and played PS2 and 3DS games, even Wii. So, there was a pretty strong indication there that it's probably a G1 Gen 2 or Gen 2's chipset.
Yeah. I'm really curious about this device, specifically what the price ends up being.
Yeah.
I think, I talked about this even just earlier in this episode about how this is kind of their like Switch Lite clone in some ways. But this video in particular to me, I think really made it feel like it's them taking a direct shot at Retroid.
I think so because they also, when they were doing switching between games, a lot of people thought it suggested an OLED screen because the blacks were so deep. And it also, I guess, supports turnip drivers. So I think that there's a lot here that suggests that maybe they're taking a shot at Retroid, which I think has also been teasing that they may have yet another handheld in the offing very soon too. I saw on social media the other day.
Yeah. There's the Nova, and then I think
something after that I think is coming.
I'll be interested to see what that ends up being. I think this 55G1 device, it seems enticing as long as it kind of comes under the price of the current Retroid Pocket.
I think it's going to be hard only because to get the most out of a chipset like that, you want more memory.
Right.
And there are some Geekbench scores that are suggesting that it has 4 gigabytes of RAM, which seems a little light to me. So it's hard to know exactly what's going on here. We'll have to see.
But also I could keep it cheap, because like...
Well, yeah, for sure.
I'm just thinking if it's like... The sense that I get from it, at least, is this is the Retroid Pocket 4, but better, and by Anbernic. And as long as you price it with that in mind, I think that probably works. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like if it's like 150 to 200, somewhere in that vicinity.
I was thinking 200 is where this will probably come in, would be my guess.
Yeah.
But it'd be great if it was less.
I think that they could make it happen. I don't know why. I have a little bit of hope in my heart for it. But like the Retroid Pocket 5, for example, is 200 right now.
Okay.
So if this thing is $200, I don't know how that thing succeeds by comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, hard to know. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about this, Brendon, a couple of weeks ago, but did you see all the stuff about the pricing about the TrimUI Brick Hammer Pro U?
No, tell me about it. I didn't see this until I saw it in the rundown this morning.
Yeah, this isn't a super news story, but when we first talked about this, it was anticipated that these things were going to cost about $150, which seemed like a reasonable price for what it's billed to be. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. And there were third parties who were offering it for around that price. These, especially with TrimUI, there's like a handful of third-party sellers that typically get them and resell them. And very shortly after we talked about that, all the retailer pricing got updated and increased the prices roughly $100 per device that had been announced.
That's so much.
Which is a lot. So we're talking like $250. So roughly, I mean, there's different models, so it's like $240 to $250-ish. And these third-party sellers basically offered people either a refund or to pay the difference. And, there were various things that people could do who had already put in pre-orders. Because I think at the time that we talked about it, we were intrigued by it, but they were already sold out pretty much everywhere. Well, they were sold out for $150, which was a reasonable price. And then they nearly doubled it.
Huh. Okay. Well, this updates how I feel about the 55G1 then, because I think this is the same chip, right? I mean, this thing has the Snapdragon G2 Gen 1. This thing has 6 gigs of RAM, so maybe 2 extra gigs there, and then some onboard storage, I would imagine, but probably not much. That's very interesting. I mean, that might mean that the 55G1 is going to be the 200, 250 range, which at that point, again, I would probably tell people to buy the Retroid Pocket 5 instead, or maybe the 6 if you're considering that price range anyway.
Right.
Unless you really want it to be vertical, in which case the TrimUI Brickhammer Pro U, I guess, is maybe the way to go.
Don't forget
I wonder
AYANEO.
how much of that is
AYANEO.
parts and how much of that is metal, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's bottom line, it's just a big disappointment. But because I like TrimUI stuff, and the metal ones look great. I mean, none of us have actually ever pulled the trigger on the metal one, which I think is kind of amazing that none of us ever did, because I know we've all been tempted by it.
I've been extremely tempted by the Brickhammer. Yeah, very much. I am still, I think, for TrimUI specifically, I'm holding out for their weird clamshell.
Yeah, boy, when did they first tease that? It was forever ago.
And it might have even been last year. I don't even remember.
I think it was.
There are 2 clamshells also specifically they've been testing. One of them is, like SP style, and then the other one is more an actual clamshell.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm dying to get my hands on if they ever do it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Well, Brendon, I think that might be it for today's episode.
Yes. Thank you for putting up with my description of Sincere from Love Island, dear listener.
Well, now I want to watch Love Island after hearing about a villain named Sincere. I mean, come on.
Don't do it.
What more could you ask for in your reality TV than that?
Surgeon General's warning, don't watch Love Island.
Oh, man. All right. Well, in NPC XL today, we are going to talk a little bit about where the handheld industry stands today and where we think it might be going, because we're about halfway through the year. We figured it'd be a good time to do that. We'll revisit it at the end of the year when we do our handhelds of the year, our hotties. But for now, you can find me and Brendon over online. Brendon's at wavelengths.online and overworld.vg. Of course, Federico and I are both over at macstories.net. And you can find any of us on social media. Just search for our names there. Talk to you next week.
Go to johnvorhees.co while you're at it.
Oh, yeah.
Not .com.
Yeah, the .co. Check out that really great resume CV type site. There's not much to it. All right. Talk to you later, Brendon.
Bye, everybody.